What if the very act of believing something could help make it true? Not through magic, not through wishful thinking, but through the real and measurable influence that a committed belief exerts on how you act, what you notice, and what you are willing to risk. This is not a self-help slogan. It is the philosophical core of William James's theory of belief, and it is one of the most radical, carefully argued, and persistently misunderstood ideas in the history of psychology. William James was not a naive optimist. He had survived a decade of crippling depression and existential paralysis before arriving at his mature view of belief. The question that haunted him was brutally simple. How do we commit to anything, to a course of action, to a person, to a worldview, when certainty is unavailable? And certainty, James observed, is almost always unavailable. We are creatures who must act in the dark. In his landmark essay, The Will to Believe, published in 1897, James set out to answer this question with philosophical precision. He argued that beliefs exist on a spectrum from the purely intellectual to the deeply practical. When we face what he called a genuine option, a choice that is live, forced, and momentous, we cannot escape the necessity of taking a position. To refuse to choose is itself a choice. And that choice, like all others, carries consequences. James distinguished between two kinds of errors we might make when forming beliefs. We might believe something that turns out to be false, or we might fail to believe something that turns out to be true. Traditional epistemology had always emphasized the first error, the danger of credulity. James insisted that we reckon equally with the second, the cost of excessive skepticism, of holding back from commitment until the evidence is overwhelming. In many of life's most important domains, that level of certainty never arrives. This brought James to one of his most daring claims. In certain domains, particularly social and moral ones, our believing something can contribute to making it real. Consider friendship. If you approach a new acquaintance with the genuine belief that they are trustworthy, you will behave differently than if you approach them with suspicion. Your openness invites their openness. Your trust calls forth their trustworthiness. The belief, in part, creates its own verification. James called this the self-fulfilling character of social faith, and he saw it as a deep truth about how human beings construct shared reality. In his magnum opus, The Principles of Psychology, published in 1890, James analyzed belief in cognitive terms. He observed that to believe something is not simply to hold a proposition in mind, it is to treat that proposition as a guide to action. Belief has a motor component. What we genuinely believe shapes what we are willing to do, what alternatives we even consider, and what we perceive in the world around us. Two people with different beliefs walk through the same environment and literally notice different things. Belief is a filter, a lens, a bias, and it operates largely below conscious awareness. James returned to these themes in his masterwork Pragmatism, published in 1907. There he articulated the pragmatic theory of truth, that the truth of a belief consists in its usefulness, its capacity to lead us satisfactorily through experience. A true belief works. It fits with other beliefs, predicts what we encounter, and guides successful action. This was not relativism. James was clear that some beliefs work better than others, and that the long-run verdict of experience is a genuine constraint. But it was a radical departure from the idea of truth as simple correspondence with an external, mind-independent reality. Modern psychology has vindicated much of what James intuited. Research on self-efficacy shows that believing you can do something significantly improves your chances of actually doing it, not because belief is magic, but because it alters your persistence, your effort allocation, and your interpretation of setbacks. Studies on placebo effects reveal that belief in treatment produces measurable physiological change. The neuroscience of predictive processing suggests that perception itself is shaped by prior belief. The brain is constantly generating predictions and updating them against incoming data, which means our beliefs literally influence what we see. James would not have been surprised by any of this. What he grasped, long before the experimental evidence was in, was that belief is not a spectator activity. It is a participant in the construction of experience. The person who believes that effort matters will persist longer and therefore accomplish more, confirming the belief. The person who believes that outcomes are fixed will disengage earlier, confirming that belief instead. Neither person is irrational given their starting assumptions, but the consequences of the two beliefs are vastly different. The practical implication James drew was not that we should believe whatever is pleasant. Beliefs must ultimately survive the test of experience. Wishful thinking collapses when it meets reality. His point was subtler, that in the gap between evidence and action, between data and commitment, we must exercise what he called the will to believe. We must take responsibility for our epistemic choices, recognizing that belief is never neutral, that every position we take carries a cost and a consequence. To live well, James argued, is in part to believe well, to choose beliefs that are life-giving, action-enabling, and socially constructive. Not arbitrarily, but because we understand that in a world of irreducible uncertainty, the beliefs we inhabit shape the world we create. Subscribe to The Psychology of William James to explore more of his timeless ideas.